Hello.
Okay, I never noticed that our countdown says it's time for the pre-show. That's really nice. It's
I'm
like we're
glad.
in theater.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Hi, Dave.
Hello. We got 5 people on. I mean, 2 of them are us.
I don't think it counts me. Oh, and here's
Yeah.
Heidi.
Okay, great.
Hey guys,
Hi, Heidi.
Hello.
Okay.
that was my quickest switch ever. I did it. I'm like terrible at staying on time with my clients. And so I have to say, like, this whole COVID working from home thing has like really forced me to be good about my time management. So there we go. One of the positives.
I've been really impressed with my counselor as well.
Hmm.
And then I just make sure to book the last session of the day.
Nice one.
No, my counselor also works with kids, and so
Uh-huh.
I take the last session of the day, also knowing that many of her clients can't stay up until 9 p.m.
Right. Well, Sarah, if you were my client, I would be happy to see you as my last appointment of the day. Because when I have like, I look at it and I'm like, oh, yay, I get to see that person at the end of the day. It's like a great thing.
Hello to my dad.
Oh, and by the way,
hello.
Heidi, we're already live on YouTube.
Oh,
just
yeah.
so-
Alrighty.
By the way, yeah, that was like perfect timing.
Here we go.
yeah.
You know, the
So-
pre-show.
You've done this
The
before.
pre-show.
so
I've
that's
done this
good.
before. Yeah,
Yeah. And hopefully you listened on Sunday.
I did.
Yeah?
I
Great.
kind of had to, remember? I was there.
Oh, yeah, right. You were in the room. Yeah.
It was actually really interesting because like I always have my phone and I take notes on my phone, and I've realized like for myself that's something that helps me focus on what's being said. It was really weird being in the room with you on Sunday and taking notes there because I found I engaged more than I do at home, which surprised me because I
Hmm.
didn't think it was any different, but it was. So,
Huh.
yeah.
That's good. Good observation about yourself. It's also, I always find it like also interesting, like being in the room when Dave's just talking to the camera, like
Yeah.
no recognition of who's in the room or what's going on. That's okay.
I don't engage at all with the audience.
Yeah, because like in relation to how many people are watching through the
Yeah.
camera, like that's where your focus should be. But
Absolutely.
I was just telling Dave that I'm remembering what he was preaching on Sunday, though after some of the tech issues that we had, I think I was like coming down from like a little bit of
It was a wild day.
an adrenaline ride by the time the sermon was going, because our internet had stabilized by that point. And I was just that's what I was doing. I was paying so much attention just to here's the casual picture. I was paying so much attention to Dave's sermon just to like figure out what slide was coming next,
Ah, yes.
because I was having to change the slides, and Dave didn't realize until after the service that I also like didn't know how to turn on, because he had his speaking notes like embedded in the presentation.
Oh man, that was so rough.
But we just got a new version of ProPresenter, and I don't know how to turn on so that like the back of house person can see the speaker notes. And so I was literally just like hanging onto his every word, being like, okay, he's
She was
mentioning
using her intuition.
yeah, okay, he's about to mention Greek and transition. Like just oh. Whew.
That's actually every slide. Just every-
And then you threw me off by having that one slide timed, but then
Yeah,
later,
the slide on a timer.
but then your reflection questions weren't on a timer, because then I was like, are they gonna pop up as a timer?
Yeah.
It worked out.
So annoying.
It worked out.
Yeah. So thanks for rolling with it. Carolyn only knows what is going on via the chat. Guys, we should try and throw off Carolyn.
Yeah, she's in a workshop this morning. Taking one for the team.
Wow.
Still has virtual coffee open. Love it.
Well, she's got what, 4 monitors, I think she said the other day. So, right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna drop something in the chat just to mess with her.
This is gonna be about grapefruits.
There you go. No, nobody say anything.
Oh. Oh no.
I'm expecting a text. What did you just say?
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting Sunday.
Nice one.
So, yeah, this Sunday we've got Daryl preaching for the first time in who knows how long.
3 months?
Yeah, first time. Yeah, it's his first time preaching to just a camera. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, probably February was the last time.
Yeah.
For him. So that's good. We got a couple of guests here in June and July, which is helpful. Although I'm doing most of it still.
This Sunday coming up is my I mean, we record these in advance, but it's my last Sunday teaching kids church in a while. I'm really excited for this Sunday's episode of Kids Church. We're doing a Dr. Seuss book and celebrating our graduating grade 5s. And so myself and Annika and Kaylee went around to all of our grade 5s and like celebrated with them. And Annika filmed it and made a really cool like montage of us going around and praying for our grade 5 kids and stuff, and so that's going to be in our video. But then after this, Kaylee's taking over for
the whole summer.
For 9 weeks.
Cool.
All right.
So
I feel so lucky because I get sneak peeks of everything as she's editing it here. It's like, oh, cool. So I got to see some of the video already.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, she did such a good job on the like car vlog. It was like very like I was like, oh, I feel like a YouTuber. Like
she's like, Mom, I was so freaked out. I had like my camera strap wrapped around my wrist.
Oh my gosh!
And, like way out the car window. It's like, oh my word.
I was like, yeah, she didn't like warn me or anything, and then all I see is a camera outside my rear view or the side mirror, and I was like, Annika, if you drop that. Like my heart stopped. That, and also we were filming a music video, and we had been spending days looking for a source of water that we could stand in, and Campbell Valley did not provide said source, and so then we were gonna check out the park that's near your guys' house, and we happened to pass over the creek, and we're like, oh, this is actually because we were going to head to like the pond where all the dogs swim. Yep. Lake pond thing. But we were kind of like that water's kind of yucky, and so we found a creek. And again, Annika was like, "Okay, let's go," and I'm like, "Just be careful with the camera, like." Pass it to me. I'm standing still. It was all good. It was all good, and the video turned out so well. But I've appreciated her willingness to jump in, and again, and she even told me, she was like, "Don't worry, Sarah. I wrapped it around so many times, and I made sure." And I'm like, "Okay, I trust you. It's your camera."
That camera is like her baby. So yeah.
She takes good care of it.
She does.
This stresses me out.
It's all good, Dave.
Well, we're after 11 o'clock. I guess we're into showtime now.
We
All
should
right.
have like another like a wipe, a transitional wipe that happens like now it's time for the real show. Heidi, I don't know if you heard this, but Dave just realized today that the countdown that I created, like it says it's time for the pre-show.
Oh,
Dave,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I guess I never joined early enough.
that's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
So we've made it a thing, like the movie theaters,
Nice.
where, and honestly, like the quality of the content is pretty comparable. Like it's just, I don't know about you guys, but I do not need the pre-show at the movie theater. Why
No.
are you talking to me? Like,
So
I don't need that noise.
John,
I probably shouldn't say this, but you should go to the sensory-friendly showings because there is no pre-show. It's fantastic.
Did not know that was a thing.
Yeah. It's well, the sensory-friendly showings have been great for our family because you go in, there's no pre-show, you sit down, it's quiet, and then when it's time for the movie to start, the movie starts. There's like a, welcome, here's the sponsor, and that's it. They keep the lights like at half lighting, so not totally dark.
Yeah.
And of course, like the kids are free to move around as they need. But that whole, like the first time Rich and I went to a movie after we'd been doing the sensory movies with the kids, we're like, holy moly, it's so loud. And it's like, oh, they run like so many different things at the beginning and it's annoying. And you're just like, man, I don't want to hear all this. So yeah, sensory friendly is the way to go.
John loves the like not just the trailers, but like the pre-show as well.
Oh.
So
he loves it. Does he interact?
He'll.
He interacts.
I have the.
Game
I have.
what
I
actor is this?
I
Oh,
have.
man.
I have the that app downloaded. He'll like answer the question just to himself because he knows like all. He knows all trivia questions. In the
John
world.
does.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, best person if you're ever are doing like pub trivia or anything like that. Like,
Wow.
great person to have on your team.
My memory sucks and I always admire people like that. Like, how do you remember everything?
Yeah, no, but it's all just random facts.
Yeah. We have that a little bit in our family too. My mom's
Yeah.
really good at that. And it's only useful. We always are joking about like what could that brain capacity be used for? Like if we could empty out all the names of every character from 80s TV shows, you could be a doctor.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. I like this question asked by Carolyn. Maybe is this our icebreaker for the day? Carolyn says, why in workshops do people ask questions answered by the session we are in? Which I feel like I may do today, like ask some questions that Dave specifically addressed in the sermon, and Sarah just wasn't paying attention enough to the sermon.
You were
I'm paying attention in a different way.
In a different way.
Yeah.
You're busy saving the whole live stream.
Oh, thank you.
Anyways, we should probably do our little intro or whatever.
Yeah, go for the intro.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Virtual Coffee Time. If you're watching this live, then we're live, or if you're watching this later, then that's fine too, I guess. But this is a time that we try and have an interactive online connecting time. This is a ministry of South Langley Church, which you know because you're on our YouTube. And so my name's Dave. I'm the lead pastor of the church. Over here, we have Sarah. Sarah, introduce yourself.
My name's Sarah, and I've already been introduced. I'm the director of children's ministry here at South Langley Church, and apparently somebody who tries to live stream things occasionally. It's becoming more and more frequent in my life. And then down here, we have Heidi.
All right. I'm Heidi, and I'm one of the members at South Langley Church. I think we've been there for like 7 years now. So, yeah.
Crazy.
Happy to be here.
Well,
Heidi, I remember filming your testimony videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah, totally. You and Wes came
Yeah, that
and
was
interviewed us.
Yeah, that was back when we did not do video to the level that we do now. It was just
we were the first ones because you guys were like, well, let's try it out with you guys and see how it works. So yeah, I remember that because you guys said, yeah, this is the first time we've done like a video testimony. So
Wow. And here
Production
we are
quality
today.
was not that high. Yeah. I think we had like the camera up on some books on your coffee table or something. Like
probably.
Yeah. Cool.
And
Well,
here
anyways,
we are today.
Here we are today, and video is all we do.
Yeah.
Who knew?
There you go. So yeah, like it says on your screen, you can interact in the YouTube comments in the chat section here. If you're with us live, if you're watching this back later, no one's gonna talk to you. I guess you can leave a comment. Yeah, you can also text the number that's on your screen there, and the other people in the chat won't see that, but we'll try and call it out on the air. And what else do we have to say, Sarah? Oh, post a picture of yourself doing, attending, this thing that we call virtual coffee time.
We need to post in the comments. I want to see a picture of Carolyn multitasking, though maybe she actually shouldn't post it. Evidence.
I'm telling her.
We can DM it.
Yeah. So, anything else? That's our intro, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Should we do table topics?
Go for it.
So just so you know, everyone who's watching, we always start off kind of light, just with a chat, and then after a little bit, we debrief and talk through the reflection questions from the Sunday's teaching time. So here we are, table topics.
No helper to pull the card for you today?
No helper. I don't know what they're doing.
We haven't seen them in a few weeks, actually. I feel like
that's true.
They're all finished school.
Yeah, they are.
Nice.
And our household rhythm has changed because Rosie went from 2 naps to 1. So they don't tend to be upstairs at this time now.
Okay.
So there you go. All right. So we who are on camera will answer this question, and everyone who's watching, we invite you and encourage you to answer this question in the chat.
Dave, I just gotta say before you write this, I am so proud of you for posting the link on the Facebook post today. Right? I was just about to do that, and look, it's already there. Love it.
Okay, you guys ready? Oh, this one is is brutal. Do most bad experiences turn out for the best?
Oh.
Well.
So, time for a lighthearted conversation to break the ice. Should we do a different one?
No, we can do that one. I mean, if you want to do a different one, that's fine too.
I want to do a different one.
Okay.
Guys, I'm
was
not
just
even
preparing
kidding.
all the verses I was gonna quote.
I'm not even kidding. I just pulled another one out, and it was where were you on 9/11?
I totally remember where I was.
Oh, definitely. I was a few weeks ago. We were talking about this with the girls that I take care of, and yeah, it was a big conversation. Pull out another one.
This is wow.
This is what happens when you pull from the middle of the deck.
Here you go, guys. Are you old school or new school?
Okay, I think this is a good one.
This is a good one.
But nobody's gonna answer.
Oh, I'm waiting for you, Sarah.
Oh, okay.
Like, this is a good one. I'm like, go for it.
I think in. So I'm gonna interpret this question however, but the first thing that comes to mind is I think a lot of people would assume that like. I'm a tech. I obviously do spend a lot of time on technology and am pretty like comfortable with computers and things. But I actually prefer doing things like by hand. And so if I I'm taking, if I'm in a class, I'll take notes by hand and then later type them up. If I'm having to read a document, I'll print it out, read it, the hard copy of it, and then if there's any edits or things that I have to make, we'll do them on paper first and then translate it over into a digital format. But so in that way, I think, I at least when I've talked about this with sometimes people at work or whatever, people are sometimes surprised, oh, you still do paper. I'm oh yeah, I need to do paper. That's just how I can interact without, I think it's a big thing for me is without being distracted. I think in a lot of other ways I'm also kind of old school in a traditional sense. But I'm also new school, I guess. New school. I don't what is that phrase even? I'm also new school. I've got purple hair, so. Or is purple hair old school? Old school cool.
I'm thinking, man, our brains went in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
What this question made me think of is there are kind of two ways that people view history. They view it as cyclical or progressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and so we as modern Westerners, we're progressive. We, not politically progressive, but we believe that there's this trajectory of history where we're building progress. And I think, if I'm honest, we still are. I think that we human beings remain subject to the same foibles. We have the same kinds of weaknesses, but I do believe in the progression of history in terms of the accumulation of knowledge. And so, I'm at 33. I think that we're a little bit, human beings are a little bit smarter now than they were when I was born. So I tend to lean in favor of new knowledge, because I think I just have that belief that we can get a bit better. We are amassing knowledge and expanding our consciousness as a species. So I would lean toward, in a lot of things, toward new school, I would think. So there you go.
Well, my first thought was, I think both. And then, of course, Sarah, when you said, what is new school? I'm yeah, what is new school? So I looked it up, and it says, new school, informal, idiomatic, a style, way of thinking, or method for accomplishing a task that is typical of the current era as opposed to former eras. So yeah, I think in some ways, I like to think of myself as progressive and, in the current era. And in some things, I definitely feel I take on new things and try new things. And then in other things, like you, Sarah, I read on my Kindle, but when it comes to something other than easy reading stuff, I would prefer to have a hard copy that I can have my pen and paper with. Just kind of a mix. For my work, when I take notes in session, some people do all virtual notes or don't take notes at all. Well, I take notes pen and paper. I'm the pad of paper with a pen. That's how I track my notes. But when it comes to invoicing or appointment keeping, I do all of that online, and I love it. So I feel in some ways old school, and in some ways new school, or adopted old school.
Comments, what do you guys think? Or in the chat? Other than we don't say foibles enough.
Carolyn said that she's a hashtag new school, so I don't know if she's got the volume turned on or if you just held the card steady enough for her to read. Oh, you posted the question, didn't you? Oh no, she commented hashtag new school before you repeated the question.
Okay. So everything that we
So if you start typing, or at least for my Google results, if you start typing old school versus new school, the first comparison that comes up is tattoos. So I'm more of a fan of new school tattoos.
All right, screen
That's
share.
hilarious.
Screen share it for us. Show us an example.
How about I just use my words? Some of these.
Too much skin in these pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially, the new school is just like the idea of like having heavy line work but vivid colors. So like tattoos from like the 1970s versus before that, where it was mainly like black and white or like designs. So like kind of the typical like Navy sailor tattoos with like strong dark lines and then bright colors that kind of like fade over time. That's new school.
Oh, I'd have to say I'm new school when it comes to tattoos then.
I still didn't quite catch what you mean, but okay.
That's okay. Ooh, rap also. Old school rap versus new school rap. Okay.
Now, what's going to be more scandalous, the tattoo examples or the rap examples? The rap examples.
Yep. The other thing that I thought of was with the girls that I nanny, we often talk about how certain subjects were taught differently over time. And one that really stands out to me is like how math over time has been taught differently. And I think of a song that Kim actually shared with me, which is now one of my favorite new math song. And it's a song, when was this written? It's called New Math, and it's all about like carrying and regrouping for math, and how that was like made. I think that came about, like that was introduced into curriculum in the 60s, I think. And so just like, again, how people learned math differently. And one of the things that I often, or I don't hear it as much anymore, but for a few years there, I was often hearing critiques from like parents about how kids are like learning math in really like new and strange ways now, and that's because they've updated their curriculum, and so it's actually giving kids a better understanding of a better number sense, so like a better understanding of how numbers work together, so that they have a stronger foundation. Where when I was in school, it was kind of this new math style where it was just like numbers are numbers and we can regroup. But even before that, like there was like kind of what you're saying, Dave, like we've grown and developed as a society that like we've understood that like prior to, back in the 60s, before that, they didn't even have like the regrouping and the ones and the tens places and stuff. Like they had other ways of, doing addition and subtraction. And so that was the other thing, that old school versus new school.
Yeah. But education is, I mean, that's probably why it's old school and new school, right? Because there's different, there's an older way of training, but the ways that we educate people in anything are like some of the most rapidly evolving things that and I don't know if it's just because we, like, for so long there was no attention given to like how we learn or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now in the last 50 years, maybe 100 years, we're like tuning into children's psychology and learning styles and that kind of stuff, right?
I took a really interesting course in linguistics once on I think it was just like general, I can't remember if it was a psycholinguistics class or just like some like theory of language stuff, but we spent a good amount of time talking about how your language can, again, like influence your like your grasp of numbers and your number. And one of the things we talked about, how often in Asian languages, like kids at a younger age are better than math. And I don't fully know how accurate this is, but one of the things that we studied was that like in some languages, something like to get like, so in English we have 10 plus 10 equals 20. There's no correlation between those words, where in some Asian languages they're like 10 plus 10 is 1010. And so even
that's awful.
No, it's great, because even a 4-year-old knows that 10 plus 10 is 1010. Like, I think you see that a little bit in French, where like 16 is
right,
or 17, 17, or what's 80? Excuse my pronunciation. Like 80, yeah, 80. And so there's a little bit of, but so their language actually has a built-in number sense. And so yeah, you can take a 4-year-old and say, what's 10 plus 10? Oh, it's 1010. And so then they get a better start. Like it's not necessarily that like those people are smarter than us. It's just that their language is built in and developed for like that. They have a stronger number sense, where in English there's no reason why 10 plus 10 equals 20. Like no like logic in the words themselves will help you answer that question.
Right. Wow.
Anyways.
Interesting.
There's a whole side conversation going on in the chat about cyclical and progressive views of history.
Also a great linguistics course to take. You don't realize how much philosophy and just like, we also studied a lot of languages that are like cyclical, like based rather than chronological, or not, like linear. That's the word I was looking for.
Right. Huh.
Take some linguistics courses if you have the chance.
Where did you take the courses, Sarah?
My undergrad is in linguistics, so I have a linguistics background at UVic.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, that was just a at that time I thought I was going to be in education, and to complete your PDP at UVic, you just have to have a undergrad in any topic if you're going into elementary in any subject, not necessarily one of the cores. And so I was like, well, what's going to be the easiest to get through 4 years? And so I kind of spent my first year like trying out different things. So I ended up doing philosophy and linguistics, because those were really exciting. But if you're interested in taking some courses, we have a great relationship with CanIL, and I'm sure Kim could get you hooked up. But like, it's actually really fascinating, the study of linguistics, and so many different branches of linguistics. So my background is actually in sociolinguistics. So how people use language to like define themselves and identify themselves, and also language change over time. So how society uses language.
Cool.
Kim's pointing.
And they have a book called Frindle.
Yeah, one of the girls that I nanny is reading it right now. It is my favorite book of all time. The synopsis. Oh yeah. The idea is that there's no reason why like a dog is called a dog. Like there's nothing inherent about the word dog that is related to the thing that we all agree. And so this grade 4 or 5 boy asks his teacher, like, who says what a word means? And she says, well, you do, Nick. Like all of us, by using the same words, we all agree that a pen means a pen. And so from that point on, Nick decides that a frindle is going to mean the writing utensil that you use that is filled with ink. And I actually did a study on it for one of my final projects on whether our understanding of how new words are adopted, whether it would like translate into real life. Yeah, Adam and Eve named the animals. That's who says a dog is called a dog. Thanks, Kim.
Oh, I
Oh
love Kim's
man,
comment. She says, "I know a place where you can take some classes."
I tell you,
Oh,
NIL.
perfect.
You know, I went to seminary like at Axe Seminaries, and which is the building next to NIL, and they share like when they teach biblical Greek and Hebrew, sometimes they overlap. Like they'll have the seminary students and the linguistic students study together, and so like you'd be with all the same people in all the seminary courses, and then like for your biblical languages, NIL students would come over, and like they would just crush us at Greek. Like they were so much better. And man, I just so for 4 years that was my relationship with NIL was just that's where the people come from who are way better at Greek than me.
But the thing is they're not better at Greek. Their mind is just better at adapting to the different language, like the different constraints of the language.
Right,
They've got a better
right.
language sense.
They've got a better language sense. Should we talk about Sunday?
Yeah.
Let's
Sounds
talk about
good.
Sunday.
Give us a recap. Trigger. Jumpstart my brain, Dave.
Yeah, so on Sunday, we talked about the sixth beatitude, which is blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God, which is, I think, a really intriguing beatitude. And so, yeah, talked about how when Jesus said this word pure in their context, it had a very specific meaning. It was the word that was used by the Jewish people to talk about ritual cleanliness, which is, you know, that's kosher law going back to the Old Testament. It's this whole thing, and that was like, you know, I don't know, like 60% of their religious life was just bound up in the rules and regulations around what it meant to be ritually clean. And so that was a big deal for them. But Jesus comes along and he actually says, no, that's not what God is after. That's not a successful and a fruitful faith journey, just going through the exterior motions. It's about a heart reality. And so Jesus takes particularly the Pharisees to task because they were so good at the outside show, and they didn't really have the inward reality. In fact, Jesus says that they're filled with greed and self-indulgence. And so, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, that's kind of the big takeaway, I think, from Sunday, is that it's this internal reality that we're after. And, you know, talked a little bit about how it says the pure in heart will see God. And you know, the Pharisees actually had God in flesh right there with them and completely missed it. And the kingdom of God was dawning and they completely missed it. And it's probably because they were not actually positioned to see that God was present and was working like all around them. But they didn't have that heart purity. They'd just been so focused on going through the motions. And so that's and so it's the takeaway is don't be like the Pharisees. So Sarah, does that trigger some memories?
Yes, I think so.
A fun speaking of languages, a fun thing is that this Greek word pure, katharos, is the word from which we get catharsis. So when we talk about feeling catharsis, that feeling that you feel when you move through difficult emotions, it's linked, like Aristotle talked about it being linked to the experience of watching like a tragedy, like a Greek tragedy, the plays. And so it's this feeling of kind of emotional purification where you like purge I don't know if you ever, like, anytime when I've had like a good cry, you know, you feel this like sense of relief afterwards. It's catharsis. So it comes from that word. Anyways, not that I ever cry about anything.
Thank you, Karina. As soon as Dave says that we shouldn't be like the Pharisees, that's the exact song that I was thinking of as
Yes.
well. Now I
Because
just
they're
got
not there to see.
because they ain't there, you see. Oh, I
Right.
don't want to be a Pharisee.
Yeah. I don't want to be a Sadducee. Right.
Yeah.
The
It's interesting.
Sadducees were rough too. But anyways.
Thinking about this week, like, yeah, I was trying to kind of think back to like growing up and what kind of messages did I get? And I don't know, might have just been me, but I feel like in a lot of ways growing up, some of the messages were kind of mixed messages. Like on the one hand, we need to have this faith with God and this connection with God, and yet it felt like the focus really was on kind of that ritual cleanliness, right? Like
Mm,
growing up, I remember, I mean, so many rules about how to behave, right? Like you
yeah.
don't go see movies and you don't dance and you don't this and you don't that. Um, and compounded too by the fact, like I was a pastor's kid and a missionary's kid. And so um, I remember like as a young adult being in a church where the pastor was very aware of not wanting to put that pressure on his kids.
Mm,
And then thinking back to growing up and how intensely I felt the pressure to like look and be a certain way. Um, so yeah, spent some time this week thinking like, what was that all about? Like, was that just me interpreting it and me kind of putting that spin on it, or was that what was being communicated? Um, yeah, more questions.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I kind of relate to that in a, maybe a little bit different way, but like growing up in the 90s like was definitely like was growing up during like the big like purity movement.
Is my mom on the stream? Don't say anything. I gotta know if my mom. Your dad's on the stream.
Yeah. No, but like no, just like but like that like so as soon like to this day still like the word purity like it's not about it's not
Hi, Mom.
Is she there?
It's not about a heart thing though, right? Like like purity. Yeah, from like my experience and what I was told as a youth, again, similar to what you're saying, Heidi, is like it was very much a behavioral position, something that like people were like signing contracts, or about I'm gonna stay, I'll stay pure, and so in some ways, that word has kind of just been like tainted. Like for like people of like who were growing up in the 90s,
Karina's got it here, right? In our zeal to try and be a good example, I think we caved to focus on the behavior change instead of the heart change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I can remember times when as Kim saying like purity ring, like I can remember like I had like friends who also like who didn't go to like there was a short period of time where at least in some circles where like purity rings and things were like cool and then quickly like mocked, but again it was just all about what is being seen on the outside, and that appearance. But yeah, still to this day, like, when we're talking about purity, like that's where my mind immediately goes. Growing up in that culture.
Yeah, and like well-intentioned, right?
Yeah.
And I believe if I'm like I don't know if you read the book Pure by Linda K. Klein. It's about the purity movement in the 90s. Interesting historical study. But I think there's some kind of a crisis. I think it was like a surge in teen pregnancies or something like that, that kind of fueled this. And so, you want to be very sympathetic to people who were trying to help you know,
Mhm.
in bringing this, and that's probably true for all this stuff that we're talking, like all these rules and whatever.
Yeah.
And like go back to the Pharisees, you know, probably some of those guys had some good intentions, you know, but like, and so I maybe it's, you know, it's super easy for us here to say this, and I want to recognize that, but like, would you know, if Jesus is saying blessed are the pure in heart,
Mm.
would Jesus's version of the purity movement have been like to capture and transform the hearts of teens?
Yeah. Well, and I think again, like when we focus on so much like behavioral output, like
Mm.
when the behavior like isn't avoided or whatever, like there's so much shame, and you see that like not just with like sexual purity, right? Like you know, working with kids,
Yeah.
like I see shame, like you know, I see kids feel shame when they do something that they're not supposed to, and like that feeling of shame isn't a great like motivator for the behavior to change.
Right.
It just makes them more likely to hide the behavior, or you know, like withdraw, or you know, where instead if we can like, you know, change the heart and make that change something that they want, then hopefully, yeah, there's less shame, but also actual like real change. And so yeah, I think yeah, if I think Jesus's purity movement would have had a lot less, like I don't see a lot of shame except for maybe when Jesus is talking to like the kind of like the people who should have known better, like you know, when he's like talking to and I even like I was gonna say when he's talking to like Pharisees or like, you know, religious leaders, just kind of like, you know, you should have known better. But even then,
Yeah,
shame is not part of the gospel.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I'm just thinking of Matthew 15. Didn't get this into our time on Sunday, but Jesus has this talk, I believe, with the Pharisees. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up here. You know, where they're like telling Jesus something. It's something about it's about dietary laws. It's about that purity piece. And Jesus says it's not what goes into you that defiles you. It's what comes out of you. And he says later on, what comes out of the heart is what defiles you. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, and he lists all these sins, right? And
wow. Yeah.
Well, it seems like if our focus is on those outward behaviors, whether positive or negative, it ends up keeping our focus in the wrong place, right? Like if, you know, I'm focused on doing the right things and not doing the wrong things, it keeps me from really connecting with who am I in God's eyes and how does God want me to live in this situation? And in the same way, if we're like looking at ourselves and saying, yeah, I'm doing such a great job, like again, it's keeping us from really connecting with God kind of at the heart of the matter. Yeah.
I think and I do think there's also, you know, times and place for like, you know, more behavioral changes that are helpful, as Kim says, like lack of pure behavior can make life inconvenient. And just as you were sharing about, you know, food laws, Dave, I was thinking, I was suddenly, you know, like thinking about like I'm very specific about what music I listen to. Not because a lot of, you know, music is inherently bad, but just when that's what's being put into me, then that changes the way that I think. And so I don't, you know, I don't look down on that music, or I don't, you know, like I don't look down on people who listen to, you know, mainstream top 40 music, but personally, I just know that my thoughts are swayed, and those are the messages that I'm putting on repeat in my head, and personally I don't want that.
Yeah, there was some talk on Sunday in the foyer after the service, about just choosing to obey, right? And maybe my heart doesn't really want to obey, but I have to make the choice to obey. And there's something to that as well, right? That we like, part of it is, I think, choosing what's going to form our heart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also like the intent behind it, like choosing to obey because I want my heart to follow God is different than choosing to obey because I want to look good to people.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Well, Sarah, should we throw up a reflection question?
Yeah, our first reflection question, where is there a mismatch between your outside and your inside?
Sarah, these are way too personal. Looking back over this morning. Oh my gosh.
So, Pastor Dave.
You're first up.
Where is there a mismatch between your outside and your inside?
Oh man. Yeah, like it definitely, this career path definitely amplifies that tendency to, people are watching, right? And not only that, but like because there's a modeling aspect, right, to the work, there, and so there's a consciousness about about what you're sharing, because you're aware of the weight that carries for people. And that's not necessarily, I think, that's appropriate.
I really resonate with what Kim has said here, and that was where my first thought for my mismatch is how I think about myself. I regularly, growing up and still to this day, rather than talk about, treat neighbors how you would want, you treat others how you would want to treat yourself, regularly. And I have this written in places around my house, but it's like I should treat myself how I would treat others. And I think that's a big mismatch, because, when I stop and think, I'm also I've always been, like, whether it's in counseling or now, like, personally, like, when I'm having a moment of being angry with myself, like, my go-to is like, okay, let's sit and, like, picture if Jesus were here.
Yeah.
Like, what would Jesus say to me? And of course, like, it's never any of the things that I'm thinking about myself.
Yeah, that's really good, actually.
But I think that's a really big,
great, right?
Yeah.
Like we in our work, and probably for you too, Heidi, there's this element of applying grace or applying compassion.
Yeah.
Like we all three of us are in roles where we speak grace and compassion to people so much, and yet do we internalize it for ourselves? So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. I was thinking about, like, the mismatch between outside and inside, and I think, like, we all have our areas that we struggle in, right? And for me, it's funny when I think about it. I think the one area, like, I feel like generally I have a lot of grace towards people, but the area where I struggle is when someone has hurt me deeply and hasn't acknowledged it and isn't willing to, or doesn't seem capable. I find that's when I really have to kind of be in tune with what's going on inside. Like, just that idea of, like, I don't want to let bitterness and resentment take root. Like, I want to have that grace towards others, because I do. And I think generally, I know from my family, they do feel that sense. I think they do. They've said it anyways. And I know my clients just feel that sense of a graciousness towards them. But I find when it comes to this area where, like, I've been hurt, I may look gracious on the outside, but inside I'm fighting it. I don't feel gracious. I feel like angry. And so I find it's such a balance of like acknowledging the pain, like acknowledging that, yeah, that really hurt. And it may not be fair and it may not be the way I want it to be, but I don't want to dwell there. Like, that's not where I want to live my life.
Connor, you want to be on YouTube?
Hey.
No
way.
He's not into it. He just came in here to get some paper. You don't want to show people your ninja costume? No. Okay.
Dad, stop it.
He's right here. He's dressed as a ninja.
Nice.
Yeah. The other area I was gonna say where again, and for me, you know, Dave, you were saying like we're people who speak grace and like hopefully extend grace to others. And this has come up a few times over the study of the Beatitudes, but sometimes I really struggle with people who, you know, think that they have, or who just, you know, talk about with like certainty about religion that's like a different perspective than I have, or you know, people who are interpreting scripture pretty like vastly differently than maybe I am reading it, and you know, or people who, you know, kind of like the Pharisees who are like outwardly like declaring themselves as like, you know, being close with God, and then like seeing behaviors where it's like I'm not sure. And I, you know, I often don't think I struggle to extend grace in those situations. But part of it is what actually Elfrida commented on here, and I don't know if this is what Elfrida was meaning, but this is what it made me think of, being divided loyalties, serving two masters. How can I feel blessed in this? But often for me, that idea of divided loyalties is often my like, what I feel is like righteous anger is like on behalf of like people who I love. And for me, I'm like, okay, if I like love this, you know, group of people or whatever, and there's other people who are speaking against them, like it's so hard for me to hold a graceful and a loving posture towards like the opposing groups. And so my tendency
when it's real world, right? Like it's real world consequences. Yeah.
And you kind of talked about that once in a sermon, not necessarily that idea, but I'm just remembering you talking, Dave, about like, you know, when one of your kids maybe intentionally hurts the other, you know, or unintentionally, you know, like you love them both, but obviously one has wronged the other.
That's the worst.
Yeah, right?
It's so hard to
And so like that's but at the end of the day, it's also very easy to understand how you would love both your kids.
Right.
Where again, like sometimes in the world we're called to love people who aren't easy for us to love. And so, I know that I'm guilty of sometimes yet not extending grace to all people.
I like what Kim says in the chat. She says, it's important to me that there's someone to whom I've entrusted the mismatches, a good friend, a family member, Larry. Between my relationships, I've shared the dark places so that it's not something I hide. Yeah. And I think that's so true. Like, yeah, we may not be able to like share everything in a public place like this. And yet, if we don't share it, if we don't bring it into the light, it ends up keeping us captive. And so I think it's one of those. I remember when Rich and I were engaged and we had like this conversation where I had like this thing that I had to tell him, because like if I told him, I had convinced myself that was going to be the deal breaker, like he was going to be out. And so, you know, like that whole, you're all aflutter inside and you're just like agonizing over this conversation you have to have. And I remember having this conversation with him and he was just accepting and like totally loving. And then he shared kind of his deepest, darkest thing that he needed to tell me. And it was the same thing. Like, of course, I'm not going anywhere, but just like the foundation of trust that built for us, of knowing like I can share the deepest, darkest thing inside of me and it's not going to chase this person away. And I think there's great power in releasing those things that we feel like we can't share about ourselves, because as long as we keep them locked away inside, they hold us hostage.
Yeah, thanks for that, Heidi.
Let's jump to the third question.
Third question, not the second one. Is the second one too personal, or is it just not? So this one, what clutter or contamination in your heart might be blocking your spiritual vision? What heart work might help with this?
Yeah, so long ago I kind of, you know, came up with this idea of what I call soul junk, where it's just like stuff piles up. You know, that's kind of what I'm getting at with that idea of, you know, what clutter. Like sometimes it's like sin, right? That we have to do. Sometimes that's the heart work. Sometimes that's what's blocking us from being positioned for spiritual breakthrough. Sometimes it's just clutter, though. I don't know if you guys feel that. And maybe that's, you know, I'm a guy who's you know, bent toward monasticism and you know, that kind of stuff. You know, there's a part of me that is, maybe it's just like an idealized like romantic thing, but that's like, man, if I could just like, you know, become a monk or something, I'd be, you know, everything would be, remove all these distractions and all these concerns. Do you get what I'm saying? But there's an element of truth to that, right?
No, I think we spent time talking about that as a staff when we worked through, I think, was it what book did we read? The 7 Habits of, what book did we read?
Emotionally Healthy Leader.
Emotionally Healthy Leader. That's it.
Yeah. It's totally a Pete Scazzaro thing.
Yeah. We talked through that about and I you know, again, I think this is what you were even sharing about in your sermon, like how can sometimes our spiritual, like things that we think are, you know, either necessary or important to us in our relationship with God, like sometimes again those can, like the behaviors that we've always been doing, those can, you know, sometimes get in the way of connecting for real.
Of course, the danger with it being religious stuff is that not only can it get in the way, but it can also trick you into thinking that you're becoming spiritually mature, spiritually fruitful.
Yeah.
And so, you know, versus like, I don't know, like an addiction, you're more prone to know that you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys felt like this question for me, like I wonder, as we're in a pandemic and our rhythms are reshaped, have you found that that's brought any of this kind of stuff to light? You know, we're in a slower pace. Certain things in life are stripped away.
Yeah, I find, I mean, it's been good in the sense that a lot of the stuff that had me busy and running constantly was stripped away. And it doesn't mean that life wasn't busy, but it was like manageable busy. And so the thing I've found recently is just this yearning. And I was writing about it last night and trying to figure out like, what is it? But it was like this yearning for spiritual connection and yet not knowing exactly what I'm looking for. And so, you know, the question of like, what might be blocking my spiritual vision? Well, I thought that was kind of funny because if I knew what was blocking, then, you know, that would be kind of easy. So it's one of those questions. But but yeah, just the sense of like there's something that my heart is yearning for, but I'm not totally, I haven't found it yet, and I haven't totally connected with it. And it's yeah, so it's kind of led to me like reaching out in different ways to people that I maybe haven't reached out to in a while. Just kind of a sense of there's something that I'm longing for, that and it has to do with that relationship with other people piece.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting. Interesting.
I know that in the past, um, one of the one of the things that I've felt has like gotten in the way of my relationship with God is like just being okay, like
Mm.
like being able to get by through life on my own, and not being in a place of either kind of like a constant like triage of just trying to get through each day dealing with one thing after another, or being in a place where like kind of like what you were saying, Dave, of when you are dealing with like addiction, like you're in that darkness, and like you're in that space, and for some people as they're going through that, like they may know that like God's the only one who can help them. And there's been times in my life where like those times in my life where the only way that I can get through each day is like by relying on God. Like those have been times where like I feel obviously felt the closest. And so, when things have been going well, or where I've had this like misconception that I can get by on my own, that makes it a lot harder, for me to go to God. And so there's been times, that I've like prayed actually for like, hey God, like I miss being close with you, even though that meant, being in a difficult position in life. And so I think for in some ways, the pandemic has kind of caused a little bit of that. It's been interesting for me though, because previously it was kind of like in my life, it was like all like either I was in a an intense like challenging situation, or I was doing well. Like I was like in a situation that like I I was really struggling, or I was doing really well. And the pandemic has kind of like introduced life where it's like, okay, things aren't great, but life is still going on. Like it's kind of been this like middle ground for me. And it's like, okay, no, so this is how, like, even though I don't feel like I need God to get through the day, I still want to connect with God to get through the day. Or like, I don't have all those distractions of life going on, and so I can start my day with God, or like I can I still have that like draw, but it's not as like a pressing requirement just to make it through the next 24 hours.
Right.
And so for me, it's kind of felt like a little bit of a training time of like, okay, like this is how, and then as things have slowly getting like, how things have been slowly improving, it's like, okay, like this is how we continue through this time.
Right.
So that's how this like pandemic, one of the things that this pandemic has been teaching me.
Yeah, that's really good. I like what Kim's saying here. She's got a friend who has bipolar who says, if God doesn't give her the next heartbeat, then she's sunk. She said it's the same for you, Kim, only you don't have a constant crisis to remind you of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's kind of this idea, and maybe like honestly, maybe that coming back to, the monastery idea, maybe that's part of what's what's attractive and what makes that fruitful for people is like that actually comfort and convenience and privilege and living at ease like is its own kind of soul junk, its own kind of clutter.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally.
And maybe that's the kind that we people who are wealthy and well off, like maybe that's the kind that we're most subject to. Yeah. Well, hey, we're at noon. So much good conversation going on in the chat as well. Thanks you guys for engaging.
Yes,
But we should
thank
wrap it up.
you.
So just so everyone knows, this we should have said it at the beginning. This is the season finale of Virtual Coffee Time, and so we're gonna stop doing these for the summer, and encourage you to go outside, maybe even hang out with some people outside, but not too close. And we'll see what happens as we move into fall, but this will be it for Virtual Coffee Time for the next little bit. We'll continue on with the foyer, and so if you enjoy this kind of conversation, please do join us for our post-service live streams on Sunday. We have a similar conversation to this. We'll probably even I would think we'll probably start digging into the reflection questions a little bit on Sundays in the foyer. Sarah, do we have anything else to say?
I don't think so. Yeah, join us Sunday.
And thank you, Heidi, for coming on. I always
Thanks for
appreciate
having
your
me.
reflections. I guess that's it. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you later.